I'm letting College Football 26 decide the entire college football season, where I'm expecting some shocking stuff to happen. I'm really curious if this game can correctly and realistically predict this year, and I think it's only fair I make some predictions for us to track in this video. For the Heisman Trophy winner, give me Cade Klubnik, totally unbiased there. For Kentucky's record, give me 7-6, and I think Texas Tech is going to win the Big 12. Then we need to decide what Group of 5 team makes it to the playoff, and I'm going to rock with Boise State edging out Tulane for it, while guessing that Jeremiah Smith leads the country in receiving yards. And for my most important prediction, I have Georgia winning the national championship. With all of those out of the way, let's start here in week 0, where something I love about this game is the schedules are going to be completely realistic to what we're going to see this season. But then there's some stuff like the Heisman watch list, which isn't currently based off of what the odds are. I think the same is for the top 25, but as the season goes on, it should look more realistic to what we'll see throughout the year. And throughout this year, I'm going to be picking a bunch of games to spectate that have a big deal to do with the college football season. I didn't select any in week 0, where you're going to see teams like Stanford got the win, Western Kentucky came out on top, Kansas starts 1-0, but most importantly, Iowa State took down Kansas State. That's a big matchup. And I know I said Texas Tech is going to win the Big 12, but if Rocco Beck can play well, then Iowa State should be able to put up a good fight for it. Even in this game, he had 2 picks, but they still won. Week 1 is where things really kick off. You have teams like Notre Dame and Miami playing. If we just sort by top 25, you'll see some of these more important matchups, like Texas at Ohio State as well. But there is a game I am far more interested in because Mike Norvell is coming off of a 2-10 season. Florida State's quarterback has been talking this game up like they're going to take down the Crimson Tide. So let's see if this season we're going to get a new look at the Seminoles that helps them redeem themselves for that past year. Recently, Alabama announced that Ty Simpson was going to be their starting quarterback, and he has been going to Ryan Williams a lot, but he has put them in such a good position they don't even need to go for it on 4th and 2 since they're already winning by a ton. What Tommy Castellanos did, Florida State's quarterback, in the 4th quarter was he made the game look a lot more respectable, including his own stat line where he had a performance that DJ Uiagalelei would have had last season, 4 interceptions early on in this game. I think it's pretty obvious why the Crimson Tide were able to thrive so much offensively. As for some other huge results around the country, Michigan just survived against New Mexico. Clemson took down LSU, so that helps out my Cade Klubnik Heisman pick. If we scroll up here as well, you're going to see that Ohio State was going to lose to Texas. The former national champions had their score doubled against the Longhorns. I think what that means is Arch Manning had a pretty solid debut, at least for the season. He played a little bit last year. Then we have Miami beating Notre Dame by 21 points. It's very early on in the season, so even if you see one of your favorite teams lose a couple games, it's not a big deal. All of this is going to change over the course of the year. And as I scroll through these week 2 games, none of them stick out as games I care to hop into, but we're going to keep a close eye on Michigan at Oklahoma. That's going to be an important result. The rest of these, though, probably won't be close unless there's an upset. That's what I really want to see this season. For example, as I was looking through some of the SEC results, Arkansas State beat Arkansas, so the Razorbacks are set up for another very mid-season. Another shocking SEC result was my favorite team. We beat Ole Miss 2 years in a row. Dante Dowdle had a very impressive performance, 149 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. He transferred in from Nebraska. And then for the other game I said that I wanted to talk about, Michigan and Oklahoma, the Sooners won by 16. The list of John Mateer's Venmo transactions getting leaked was actually the best thing that could have happened to him because it has forced him to lock in on a whole other level, leading his offense with 506 total yards. And it's safe to say that Purdue football is still in complete poverty as they're the first Power 4 team to lose to an FCS school. Then if we look over at all the top 25 results from week 2, you're going to see that BYU's gotten off to a hot start, sitting at number 12 in the rankings. They're undefeated, while Iowa State lost the Cy-Hawk Trophy to the Hawkeyes. That is barely going to keep them inside the top 25. I've noticed Texas Tech is up here. They're my pick to win the Big 12, and there's no group of 5 teams that are currently in the top 25. As for the Heisman watch, Arch Manning's currently sitting at number 1, Cade Klubnik at number 2. We can actually see their stats down in the bottom right corner. It looks like Arch has thrown for less passing touchdowns. But Iowa State's got a running back that has rushed for over 200 yards in both of the games that he's played in so far. Sam Houston's quarterback, Hunter Watson, is up here in the top 5. Just lots of stuff to keep an eye on early on. We also have to note, in week 3, Texas A&M is playing at number 15 Notre Dame, who's already lost. If they could win this would be a huge moment for the Aggies, and the Fighting Irish can't afford to lose. There were other big games happening this week too, but it's still early on in the season, so I just decided I wanted to focus in on what Texas A&M was up to, which looks like a strong start to the season at 3-0. Notre Dame is currently down by 13 points with 10 seconds left. As you can imagine, it would be almost impossible for them to pull off this comeback, especially since they've taken way too long to snap the ball, so they're not going to win. They're going to 0-2. If you are a Notre Dame fan, it's seeming like you all aren't going to make it to the playoffs unless you can win your next 10 games. And it's not like they have a bunch of freebies on this schedule. There's some tougher opponents like a Boise State, a USC, even Boston College, Pittsburgh, Syracuse. None of these are guaranteed wins. Now, of all the games in week 3, the SEC definitely had the most interesting slate. Ole Miss has lost another game, this time against Arkansas. Then you have teams like Georgia and Tennessee playing. The Volunteers came out on top by 3. It was an overtime matchup, so maybe I should have hopped in to see how this one played out. Georgia's my pick to win a national championship, and it's not going to be likely if they're losing games like this. Then we had LSU redeem themselves for their early loss against Florida, making both of those teams 2-1. But the most surprising result from week 3 was Northwestern somehow taking down Oregon. It is seriously mind-blowing to me that the Ducks have lost this game, but I guess Dante Moore just wasn't able to handle their defense. Preston Stone came out, didn't play that well for Northwestern. No one had a breakaway game, but they got the job done, and Iowa is at a very sneaky 3-0 as they just edged out UMass by 5 points. I know it's pretty early on in the season, but Illinois has been able to climb up to number 6 in the country, South Carolina at number 7. The loss from the Ducks dropped Oregon all the way down to number 20. And for some of the teams receiving votes, when it comes to the group of 5s, Boise State is on there, but that's it. In week 4, we're going to start to see some more conference games get started. I want to see what happens between Michigan and Nebraska, just because the Wolverines might lose their second game early on in the season. And then I'm also very curious to see what happens between Illinois and Indiana. DJ Lagway in Florida at Miami could be good as well, but I think Illinois and Indiana might decide a playoff spot, because only so many teams in the Big Ten are going to be able to have success, and that's the same thing between Michigan and Nebraska. We already know that Oregon lost that one conference game against Northwestern, which makes their chance of getting to the Big Ten championship a little less likely. But it turns out Nebraska is unfortunately gonna let their fans down again. As you can see, they've just not played well. They're losing 35-10. And even if they did score a touchdown at the last second, that doesn't mean much to me, because they let a true freshman quarterback walk into their stadium in Bryce Underwood and take them down. He somehow had just as many incompletions in this game as he threw for touchdowns. Just remarkable. After that, we have Indiana playing a team that shocked the world, making the playoffs, and they're trying to do it again. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Hoosiers do this season. Same with the Fighting Illini. Now, after taking a 24-0 lead early on in this game, Indiana struggled. They didn't just drop a chance to end this game, but they've completely dropped the ball as they're currently only up by 3 points. The Fighting Illini have literally fought back. We'll see if this home field advantage, though, with a loud crowd is going to help them be able to close this game out. That's a good start for Illinois. And keep in mind, they only need a field goal to send this one to overtime. Quarterback Luke Altmaier is currently putting them in a pretty solid position. But what happens on this 3rd and 4 is a massive deal, and they're not just getting a field goal out of the drive, they're getting the game-leading touchdown as they have pulled off the comeback. It is unbelievable Indiana even finds themselves in this current position. Fernando Mendoza, the California transfer, I think, is going to have to lead them down the field to score a touchdown here. But we can't discredit what he's done in this game either. I just can't believe they handed it off. Anyway, Fernando Mendoza has thrown for 4 touchdowns, no picks, like 300 yards. He's had a pretty solid game. And it took us hopping into a few of them, but we have finally gotten ourselves a shootout. Bad communication there, but Indiana still has a pretty good shot. The halfback draw has completely faked out everybody. Roman Hemby reaches across, and they did not give him the touchdown. They had to use their final timeout. His knee must have been on the ground, but you can't take a sack here. They fumble. Illinois is going to scoop it up, and their defense has clutched up. What a game between these two teams. Illinois deserves the win with their comeback especially. Luke Altmaier helped them pull it off. And that result didn't shake up the top 25 at all. The top 10 teams did not move. We didn't see any movement until we get farther down here, but there are also teams that lost that are dropping out, like Texas Tech is very close to being out. And then there's teams like Auburn that with a win over Oklahoma on the road, they're sitting at 3-1. They're trying to climb their way into the top 25. Some other interesting results to talk about, I think at least, is Arizona State just edged out Baylor by 3. SMU has lost 2 games already, this one coming at number 20 TCU. Then we have BYU staying undefeated. We have number 4 Miami taking down Florida, giving them their 2nd loss of the season. And I have to mention the tiny Pac-12 at the moment. Both teams lost to their in-state rivals, Oregon State and Washington State. In the Big Ten, a team I was talking about, Iowa, lost to Rutgers, so they are no longer undefeated. I was saying they were at a quiet 3-0. Now they're at a quiet 3-1. But I will say there's still plenty of undefeated teams left in the country. Even just inside the ACC, you got programs like California sitting at 4-0. But Cade Klubnik is no longer on the Heisman Trophy prediction. Arch Manning's sitting up there at number 1. Kevin Jennings with 2 losses is sitting at number 2. And CJ Baxter for Texas is another Longhorn that's up here. One thing I want to check in on every so often is the players of the week that we've seen so far. Hawaii had a receiver go for 258 yards in week 0. Isaac Brown for Louisville had a pretty good performance in week 1. Cade Klubnik won it in week 2. In week 3, maybe Nico made the right decision in transferring to UCLA. And then in week 4, USC's running back Wayman Jordan went off. I don't know what week 5 is going to look like, but Oregon could lose their second game of the season at number 2 Penn State, so we definitely want to check that one out. There are so many ranked matchups going on. Another game that's pretty interesting to me is Alabama and Georgia. The Bulldogs have already lost once, so we're going to see how that one goes, but this one comes first. We got ourselves a whiteout game at Happy Valley. Not an easy environment for the Ducks to walk into, but they had a lot to play for in this one, so they came out hot. Currently, the Nittany Lions are trailing by 6. They have a ball with a minute left, but Drew Aller needs to get this one out. He could not afford taking another sack there. It's all of a sudden 3rd and 16. They got a long way to go if they're going to come out on top, which I don't think is going to happen. His offensive line is giving him no time back there. This is the first time they did, and he just sends up a bomb, which is gonna be swatted. If he put 5 more yards on that pass, which would have been hard to do, it would have worked. But the slight underthrow means that Oregon is still going to have a pretty good chance at making the playoffs. Next up, we have a big game for Kirby Smart. Number 5 Alabama and College Game Day is coming to town. This is the game of the week, and when these two teams played last season, it was electric, so I'm expecting the same. What happened, though, was Georgia got off to an early lead like they did last season, and Alabama just couldn't come back. They really struggled to finish off their drives. And part of that has to do with the fact that Ty Simpson went 10 for 21 for 140 yards. Checking back in on Tommy Castellanos and Florida State, by the way, they've won a couple of games, but then against Virginia, they came out and they let the Cavaliers put up 52 points, giving them their second loss of the year. We have teams like Utah with a 33-point road win against West Virginia, who's sitting at a quiet 5-0. Then you're going to see that Auburn was able to enter the top 25 by winning at Kyle Field. LSU also lost to Ole Miss by 3. The Fighting Illini would take their first loss of the season against USC, who's undefeated. And my college football playoff pick from the group of 5, Boise State, would lose by 2 points to Appalachian State, so that is not looking as likely now. Iowa got held to 0 points. Something went wrong with their offense. And a very motivated Mark Stoops picked up his first loss of the season at South Carolina, who's now number 5 in the country, while Colorado gave BYU their first loss. All it took was going one more week into the future, where things are really starting to shake up in the college football world. We're seeing less and less teams that are still able to stay undefeated. Most importantly, though, when it comes to the group of 5s, none of them are in the top 25. None of them are even receiving votes. And after another week of chaos, we'll check in on some of these conference standings. There is a ranked matchup that is very important for the Florida Gators. They currently have 2 losses. They have number 1 Texas coming to the Swamp. So if DJ Lagway is going to keep this team in any playoff hopes, they've got to win, which is why this is the game of the week. It's going to be a night game as well, so you know this place is going to go crazy. And they better get rowdy, because with 90 seconds exactly left in this game, Heisman projected winner Arch Manning has the ball. He really hasn't played that well so far. 160 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Make that 2 interceptions, though, because the Gators have just handed Texas their first loss of the season. I think the SEC is just going to self-implode like every team. It's going to be hard for them to get a lot of teams into the playoffs if they keep beating each other. The rankings in this game seem to factor that in, though, as currently, if you count all the teams in the top 25 from the SEC, there's 10 of them. That first loss is going to drop Texas down to number 9 in the country, as Florida is going to move up to number 23. But there wasn't that much movement in the top 25 besides that, with Utah jumping in and the rest of these teams all winning. Apparently, one team did drop from the rankings, though, Kansas State, who was number 16. I also see Navy receiving some votes. Rutgers is an interesting team receiving votes as well. They're currently sitting tied for first place in the Big 10. In the Big 12, though, things have gotten a little bit more chaotic, with Kansas State picking up their second conference loss. They lost the college football season opener against Iowa State. Now they lost by 3 points on the road at Baylor. And apparently, the reason that Navy's receiving votes now is they are the only undefeated team inside the American Conference. They're 5-0, but they're going to have a tougher schedule as the year goes on, because we know that Notre Dame's going to be on there. Boise State also lost another game, this time 48-3 against Notre Dame. So my prediction for the Group of 5 playoff team is probably not going to be them. but a team that's sneaking up out of nowhere is an undefeated 6-0 Arkansas State. I'm keeping an eye on them as well, though I've noticed that Arch Manning completely fell out of the Heisman race. A quarterback like Braylon Braxton from the Sun Belt is up here too. So much is changing there, though we're only midway through the season, so a lot is going to continue to change. Obviously, we have to see what happens in the Red River rivalry, especially since Oklahoma can't afford to get too many more losses. There's a lot of good games on this schedule. Like, I'm really curious to see if South Carolina can get their revenge against LSU. I'm curious if Georgia can go into Auburn and get the win, or if the Tigers will come out on top. So we're jumping into 3 games this week. And if Texas loses again, that's going to be a massive deal. The SEC has made things so hard for these teams to come out on top of because of how stacked it is. It's just so deep now, which does stink as a Kentucky fan, knowing that it's going to be hard for us to ever win. I mean, even Texas is having their problems. Arch Manning's going to have to get them a touchdown if they want to send this to overtime. A couple weeks ago, he was looking like the Heisman favorite. A lot has changed since then, and he is going to try and escape the pocket for the first down. With 46 seconds left on the clock, they have enough time to get a touchdown here without having to force it too much. In fact, you have to make sure that you don't leave the Sooners a lot of time to respond. They might go for the 2-point conversion if they get a touchdown too. That's a possibility. What a great throw. And it is time for a big decision. Looks like the Longhorns just won overtime. After a bad kick return, Oklahoma's probably going to want the same thing, unless they busted off a massive run. Jade Knott looked a little lost back there, though, with that carry. And this is the first time I've seen the Cheez-It Crunch Time overtime rules. Not everything needs a sponsor, but that was incorporated pretty well. Oklahoma has the ball first, and we'll see what John Mateer and the Sooners can do, starting off with a 7-yard gain. Actually, more like 9 yards. They're going to use an RPO to get the first. This is exactly what I would have hoped for, though, out of the Red River rivalry. We have a massive 3rd and 4 coming up, and Texas is going to get their pressure in, which means they're taking 3. Oklahoma seemed like they had this game in the bag just a little bit ago. Now, if their defense can't make a stand against Arch Manning, they're going to fall to 4 and 2. But that was not a well-run play. On 3rd and 10, he slings it over the middle. It's caught. They're at the 2-yard line. The Longhorns might be getting their walk-off touchdown right here with the jet touch pass. They're going to break a tackle. He is in the end zone. And Ryan Wingo just came up extremely clutch at the end so they could take home that trophy. Now we have LSU in the game of the week with their playoff hopes on the line. They've already dropped 2 games this season. If they drop another, they're not getting in. With that in mind, they came out playing extremely well with a 10-point lead, 30 seconds left. South Carolina's not coming back. They would need a touchdown on this play somehow, which isn't even going to come. And a lot of the blame on this loss can go on Lenore Sellers, who threw a couple of interceptions. Lastly, we have Georgia and Auburn facing off against each other. If the Tigers win this, the whole SEC battle is going to shake up even more. It would somehow make things even more interesting than they already are. As we look at the final minute, Gunnar Stockton needs to get his team a touchdown on this drive. He is dealing with a ton of stadium pulse. Plus, the real story in this game has clearly been about these teams' defenses, as they've only been able to combine for 21 points. He was just able to get rid of that ball there. I'm not sure what the Tigers are going with defensively. They have a lot of guys backed up. They only sent 3, but they get a hand on it. So Jackson Arnold and the Tigers are going to win. You know, my national champion pick, it's not looking likely. And that goes for about every single one of my predictions that I made. Some of the other big results around the country include Navy improving to 6-0. Michigan lost by 2 points to USC, who is still undefeated. Arizona State was not able to take down undefeated Utah. Then Ohio State fell to 3-3 by losing to Illinois. It feels like the former national champions' entire season is over. Arkansas somehow beat Tennessee, so they're 4-2. Their season's not over. BYU was able to bounce back against Arizona. Then we have Florida giving Texas A&M their second loss. It was a crazy week in college football. We got 2 ACC teams sitting on top of the top 25, and there's going to be a lot more changes coming in the future, including Navy now being a part of the top 25. I have also somehow noticed that UConn has a chance to get ranked at some point, as they receive 54 votes. But I still cannot believe that Ohio State's currently sitting at 3-3. I think I missed them losing to Minnesota the week before as well. All of a sudden, as the number 1 team Clemson, Cade Klubnik has jumped up to be the Heisman favorite with 18 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. This is still going to change a good bit. And I know I wanted to talk about the SEC standings, because currently Auburn and Arkansas are the only 2 teams that are undefeated in conference play. Kentucky had that huge win over Ole Miss, but they're about to start playing a much tougher schedule with ranked team after ranked team, so going 7-6 and winning a bowl game isn't that likely. I could definitely see us going 4-8 or 5-7 in real life, but I don't even want to put that thought out there. Looking at the games that we could look at this week, there's some good ones in the Big 12. There is also number 9 Louisville going to number 2 Miami. They're both undefeated. So that's what we're going to check in with, because a lot of this could still shape up very differently in the Big 12, so we'll tune into some of their games later on. I'd also like to see how some of the Group of Fives are doing later in this season, but there's just so many big games going on at the moment. And it's time to see how Carson Beck is settling into playing for the Hurricanes. Well, it turns out not very well. They got annihilated 41-20. He didn't even complete 50% of his passes, while on Louisville's side of things, Miller Moss did not have a great game either. They leaned on their running game with Isaac Brown going for 151 yards. In fact, I'm a little bit surprised that he has not jumped up into the Heisman race, but look at that. Clemson lost if Cade Klubnik's on number 10 Clemson. I think this is a week that's going to come with multiple upsets. Kentucky almost beat Texas, by the way. Just saw that real quick, but it seems like SMU got back into the top 25 by beating the Tigers by 2 points. Then you have all these teams down here at the bottom of the polls, with Arizona State losing to Texas Tech. You got Utah beating BYU 34-7. Notre Dame loses to USC by 2. And UConn is no longer anywhere to be seen receiving votes. Unfortunately for the Huskies, they picked up their first win of the season playing against Boston College. Their schedule was very easy up to that point. And I cannot believe all the chaos that just went on around the country. I mean, Penn State barely survived at Iowa as well. South Carolina beating Oklahoma, giving them their third SEC loss, means the Sooners probably aren't making the playoffs, but they blew that opportunity against Texas last week anyway. Tennessee beating Alabama is also a big deal for them. And player of the week wise, Chaz Nimrod for USF was actually the player of the week. If we go back a little bit, San Diego State had an offensive player of the week. SMU did with Jalen Cooper. But if there's been one team to watch out for so far, it's been Devin Dampier and the Utah Utes, because they're sitting at 7-0 with 5 games left on their schedule that are all very winnable. My prediction to win the Big 12 might have been Texas Tech, but it still seems like Utah could end up actually taking that away. In the ACC, Duke, SMU, and Virginia Tech are all undefeated in conference play, while Clemson and Miami are not. Then in the Big 10, USC is the only team that's still undefeated in conference play, but the Big 10 has 4 of the top 6 programs in the country. For some of these smaller conferences so far, teams like Liberty are 6-1, so their playoff hopes aren't looking that good. The MAC doesn't have anybody that is undefeated. In the Mountain West, Boise State is sitting at 4-3. But guess what? Arkansas State is still sitting at 7-0. They have wins over Arkansas and Iowa State. Iowa State's a pretty good program, so they might be a team that finishes this season undefeated and gets the Group of 5 spot. Then we have the SEC, who still has so many teams that are ranked, but they keep on beating each other, which is all hurting their rankings. It just means that every week there's going to be a ton of SEC games that are a big deal, like Alabama at South Carolina, Tennessee at Kentucky, not as big of a deal, but I would like to see Kentucky win. And even Auburn at Arkansas, because the Razorbacks are currently sitting at 5-2, surprisingly. We are going to look at what happens between the Gamecocks and the Crimson Tide, though. It's the game of the week, and if Shane Beamer could win this one, everyone at South Carolina would continue to love him. I think they actually have a pretty good chance at being able to pull this one off. But ultimately, they need to recover this onside kick near the end, which they didn't. And even if they got that, they would have still had a long way to go when it comes to coming back, because they were trailing 31-14 before scoring a touchdown, going for that onside kick. It just wasn't a great performance. It's not like Lenore Sellers even played bad with a bunch of turnovers. He had no interceptions. Ty Simpson just happened to have the better game. And for the first time this year, we have a playoff projection that has 7-0 Navy getting into the playoffs despite not being ranked. There's a lot of teams in there that you might not have been expecting whenever we started this season, but there's still 4 or 5 weeks left for things to change. Oregon lost another tight game, this time against Wisconsin, which actually got the Badgers ranked. Illinois is also coming off of a loss to Washington, dropping them to 6-2. That's a tough loss for them. The Huskies actually got to 6-2 off of that win. Some other notable results in the top 25 across the country that I've been able to notice is Arizona State just survived against Houston. Miami survived against Stanford. Michigan was able to take down Michigan State by 3 on the road, and we'll see how things progress in these final 4 to 5 weeks. With matchups like number 2 Penn State at 3-4 Ohio State, the Buckeyes just continue to lose. That's a game that I still think the Nittany Lions could drop. But what I'm actually more curious about, since there is so many high-profile matchups this week, is going to be Duke at Clemson. Is Clemson going to be able to bounce back? And also Georgia against Florida. In this massive rivalry, obviously the game of the week, one of these two teams is going to pick up their 3rd loss of the season. And then after it, we're going to get a battle between 2 teams that might decide who's in the ACC championship. As you can see, Gunnar Stockton has really let me down down. I said, I think Georgia's going to be able to win a championship. They're about to pick up their third loss. It wasn't the best national champion pick in the world, but I trusted the roster around him to uplift him. That puts Florida back in the hunt for a playoff spot. Over in the ACC, Virginia Tech's also sitting at 4-0, so there's a lot of teams here competing for a spot in the ACC championship at the moment. This would be a big game for the Blue Devils to win. And if you've played a few dynasties on this game, you would understand that Duke tends to do very well in sim. Clemson has already dropped a game that they shouldn't have as well, which means they can't do it again. And this is actually going to be the exact type of finish I was hoping for, as we have a tie game with 40 seconds left. Darian Mensah was just able to get that one out in time. His receivers stink. They had a wide open 10 to 15 yards there, and they just weren't able to pick it up. All of a sudden, it is 3rd and 10. Stadium Pulse is going to kick in. The halfback screen is not going to go far enough. So Clemson's going to get it back and probably go to OT. I really thought the Blue Devils were about to just march down the field and win with a field goal. But instead, it's time for Cheez-It crunch time. Cade Klubnik's got the ball first. He's certainly not had a Heisman performance here. That's another one of my predictions that is not going to happen, especially if the Tigers lose, but they just got the first. And you have to wonder, if they drop this game, how far would they end up falling in the polls? Both of these teams are currently sitting at 6-1 in the ACC, and I don't know if Duke's going to be able to counter back. Taking that sack makes it 2nd and 19. They might be taking another. They even lose the football, scooping it up to lose more yards. It is 3rd and 36 now. Hope has probably gone out the window for Duke. And have you ever seen a team in college overtime take a snap from their own 42-yard line? All you can do is just send up a prayer and hope for the best. At the end of the day, Clemson was able to survive there when it looked like they might not. This whole video alone makes me want to go ahead and get started filming the 136 team imperialism, but I am waiting on the rosters to be fully updated with the new freshmen. Nebraska lost to USC. That was another pretty big matchup that was going on. Penn State took care of Ohio State. Louisville dropped a game to Virginia Tech, though, who still has not lost a conference game. And Georgia fell down to number 19 with their loss against Florida. Tennessee lost to Oklahoma, so they went from 8 to 18. Lots of movement in the polls here. Tulane has moved on up. I do not see Navy anywhere either. I should also point out that South Carolina and SMU have dropped out of the polls too. And unfortunately for Navy, they lost to North Texas by 17 points, which is what makes Tulane the highest ranked Group of 5 team at the moment. Then you have Miami beating the brakes off of SMU, securing their spot at number 4 in the country. In the Big 12, you have Arizona State taking down Iowa State, which ruins their chance at winning a conference championship most likely. Texas Tech moves up to number 7. Utah still undefeated. In the Big 10, we got Illinois and Michigan, both sitting with their 2 losses, 7 wins, trying to fight for a playoff spot as well. Indiana is sitting at 7-2. Also. And on the SEC side of things, South Carolina has had a rough last few weeks. They've just been sliding down the rankings. Kentucky's sitting at 3-5. I don't think we're going to go 7-6. It's going to be more realistic, unfortunately. But that sums up week 10. If there's anything I'm going to care about in week 11 game-wise, I think we got to look at Alabama, LSU potentially, maybe Washington, Wisconsin, though they're both almost outside the top 25. But now I feel like a TV executive just getting all of the big SEC games week after week. Looking at these current standings, Alabama's not even going to be in the running for the SEC championship. Maybe we don't watch it. But one of those 2 teams would pick up their 3rd loss, which would put them out of the playoffs most likely. Penn State and Indiana is another interesting game, because if the Hoosiers want to get back to the playoffs, they're going to have to take down the Nittany Lions. So we have a couple more interesting matchups to check in on. The way Alabama came out to start the season against Florida State, I know it was the Seminoles, but they came out strong. I thought they'd be doing better than 6-2. And I guess in this rivalry, they figured things out again, because they just annihilated LSU. The score's not popping up. But if you're a fan of the Tigers, you probably wish that it didn't. 31-3 with their total offensive yards basically getting doubled. It was not a good day for Garrett Nussmeier, I'm afraid. He had 40% completion percentage, 2 interceptions. For the LSU playoff hopes, that's probably going to do it, and now we have the Hoosiers on the line as well. After how great of a season they had last year, regression is okay, which is why I don't think Indiana fans will even be too upset that they got blown out here. At least they've been competitive. They're a top 25 team. They're better than they were. There's just levels to the skill gaps in college football. It actually jumps Penn State up to number 1 over 9-0 USC. USC and Utah are the only 2 teams that are still undefeated in the entire country. There were also some more massive results last week. Tulane lost on the road by 2 points at Memphis, which drops them out of the top 25. I don't know who the Group of 5 team that gets in is going to be. Notre Dame gave Navy their 2nd loss. Out in the Sun Belt, I hadn't checked in on Arkansas State for a few weeks, and they've lost 3 straight games, putting them at 7-3. Then Kentucky picked up their 6th loss against Florida. UConn's fallen to 7-3. At one point, they were having a pretty good season. Wisconsin beat out Washington by 3 points, which moves Wisconsin up to number 16 in the country. And believe this, Auburn lost to Vanderbilt by 18. Diego Pavia strikes again. Even Louisville has had back-to-back bad weeks as Cal just beat them by 7 points. And then my Big 12 champion prediction, Texas Tech just lost at home to BYU. Everything that's happening across the country right now is absolute chaos. Kevin Jennings is currently sitting at first place for the Heisman as well, though I think Devin Dampier might win it if Utah can stay undefeated. Cade Klubnik's still up in the running too. Over the last few weeks, those players have been pretty similar. For the 5th highest rated Group of 5 team though, I'm not sure who's going to get into the playoff. Liberty at 8-1 might be a decent option. Out of the MAC, you got 7-2 Miami, Ohio. Mountain West, Boise State at 6-3. There's just really not any good options since Arkansas State's fallen off, and so have a couple other teams. When we go over to the SEC at the moment, Auburn is still sitting on top. There's a lot of teams from the SEC competing for playoff spots. And I just realized Virginia Tech is the only team undefeated in conference play in the ACC now. In the Big 12, Utah's the only team that's still undefeated in conference play there. I don't think Texas Tech's going to work their way back to the Big 12 championship. They currently need to rely on some other teams losing that aren't on their schedule. And as I was checking in on the Big 10 standings, I just had to look over and see who has Ohio State been losing to. They lost to Wisconsin. They lost to Penn State, Illinois, Minnesota, Texas. I mean, those are definitely not games that they're going to lose. They might lose a couple of them. They're not losing all of those. They would be up here in the running for the championship. I think their fall off has been the most surprising thing of the entire season so far. When it comes to which game we're going to spectate this week, though, there's a lot to choose from, and we might actually just skip over the entire week. We're getting to the point where I just want to see conference championship games, the playoffs, who's going to win the Heisman Trophy. But then the game gave us the most annoying glitch that they could have possibly bugged into Dynasty, because it wasn't here on launch. It just doesn't show you the results of any of these games on the schedule. I don't know what's up with this glitch, but it is so frustrating, and I've sent over text about it. There's no way to see the scores of all those games from that screen. What we can do is we can look at the top 25 and see the updated records here at least, which is nice. We can see that Clemson lost to Louisville, falling to number 9 in the country. Texas lost by 3 points to Georgia, so it's looking like the Bulldogs, even with their 3 losses, might get into the playoffs. We have Baylor taking down Utah, handing them their first loss. And this was actually a game that I considered jumping into and watching, even though Baylor was unranked. They took them to overtime and pulled away. Then we have Florida. After all the watching we did on DJ Lagway, they picked up their 3rd loss against Ole Miss, which is going to make it hard for them to get into the playoff. Indiana took down Wisconsin, so Wisconsin no longer has a great shot at the playoff, and Virginia Tech must have lost alongside LSU. The annoying part about the team schedules not working, though, is now if we go over to week 13, it still says that Clemson is 8-1, even though we know that they just lost their 2nd game against Louisville. They're not ranked number 5 in the country, so all of this is inaccurate. I'm going to try some stuff to fix this, like restarting the game, and you know what? That actually did it. I have not tested that before, which makes me feel kind of dumb. I mean, the bug shouldn't be there in the first place, but it's happened in a lot of rebuilds, and I've been upset about it. If you reset the game, you just close app, and then you come back in, it should fix all of these scores. So now if we look at week 13, we can see some of these interesting matchups. Louisville at SMU might be one that I want to consider. Illinois at Wisconsin will probably overlook since Wisconsin just lost a game. Tennessee at Florida. We're not seeing Florida again. USC at Oregon's pretty good, though. I feel like if the Ducks happen to lose this game, it's not going to drop them out of the playoff, but it's going to put them in a fringe spot. And then also, we're going to watch Miami take on Virginia Tech since those two teams are tied for first place in the ACC. The only 2 matchups the Hokies have lost this season have been against South Carolina and then against Florida State on the road last week by 1 point. But if that didn't happen, it looked like they were about to stumble into the playoffs themselves. Now they're going to have to be able to come out on top at home against number 3 Miami. And unfortunately, Virginia Tech fans are going to be pretty disappointed because that's the best thing Kyron Drones has done all day. They only came away with 3 points against the Hurricanes, losing 23-3. And we have one more massive matchup before we get to the final week of the season. That last week of the regular season is pure chaos. It's when a ton of rivalries are played. Playoff spots and conference championship spots are all going to be on the line. And I can't believe what score I'm currently looking at, but USC didn't score a single point despite being undefeated all year. Dan Lanning was not on board with the Ducks picking up their 3rd loss this season. They held them to 102 total yards of offense, which now makes me want to look back at the schedule that USC has been playing they lost their starting quarterback. Even worse, Jaden Mava is going to be out for the rest of the season with a ruptured disc, which means the Trojans are no longer going to be a championship contender. They might still be in a pretty good spot to make the playoffs, but they should be playing Notre Dame to end the season, who is trying to fight for a spot themselves, sitting at 8-3, right on the outside. And we had multiple huge losses this year. Arkansas has caused more damage as Texas falls from number 7 to 17, picking up their third loss. Illinois gets their third loss against Wisconsin, so they did win that one, and even Arizona State has lost a third game. The way Louisville has collapsed in these last 4 weeks has been pretty crazy as well for a team that just beat Clemson the week before. I'm hoping my Wildcats at 4-7 can beat them, but Kentucky's not going to make a bowl game. So that means it's official. My super hopeful prediction for this video that probably wasn't going to happen is not going to be possible. Another thing I want to note is Tulane has dropped a game against Temple, falling to 7-4. They're at third in the American, so they're not going to be the 5th highest rated conference champion. I don't even think they're going to make the conference championship. But Liberty lost a game as well, which means they're 9-2, and I really have no idea which unranked team is going to get into the playoffs since no group of 5 teams having a great season. Even Boise State is currently sitting at 7-4, so my prediction for them to be the group of 5 team to make it in probably isn't happening. It's time to talk about some of the big conferences though. What could we see for some of these conference championship games? Arkansas actually has a chance to get in if Auburn or Alabama loses in the Iron Bowl. I'm not sure what the tiebreakers would need for that to happen. Then in the Big Ten, we know Michigan's going to be playing Ohio State. Not sure if they're going to be able to win that. The Buckeyes are currently 6-5, so we might be seeing Penn State and USC in that conference championship. In the Big 12, Utah and Texas Tech are still 1-2. And for the ACC, it looks like it's going to be a combination of Miami, Duke, and SMU. That's a big deal for who wins the Heisman Trophy, because if Cade Klubnik doesn't get an extra game that Kevin Jennings does, Kevin Jennings is going to have better stats, which will increase his odds of winning it. And I think when it comes to some of the games that we're going to want to see in this final week, there is no way that we're going to be able to overlook the Iron Bowl between Alabama and Auburn. That is going to be a massive one. South Carolina and Clemson, I think that's a great one to hop into as well. I don't think the Gamecocks are going to make the playoffs, but if they beat Clemson, they could knock them out of it. That'd be pretty sweet for them. Obviously, I was not expecting to have so many 2- and 3-loss teams and like no undefeated 1-loss teams in the country. Everyone seems to be pretty even this year, which would make for a great college football season. It just means with these teams' records being the way that they are, we still don't know how this is all going to play out. Clemson breaks the tackle to the 1, but they use their first timeout, which is a big deal. They're trailing by 10 points, and there's not that much time left to come back. If they weren't just wasting timeouts, they wouldn't have had to recover an onside kick to still have a chance. That was some terrible decision-making from Dabo Swinney. And what it means is it all comes down to this right here. It skips over the heads of some players, but 19 is able to catch it. That means Clemson's going to lose this game, and we will see how far it drops them. Before we can do that, though, we have gotten an incredible setup for the Iron Bowl this season. I don't think Auburn's going to be sitting that highly ranked when we get there, but I would love to see it happen. Now, I will say, offensively, this has been a super strange game. Neither team's been able to reach the end zone. It's only been field goals. Unless Jackson Arnold can get them in here as well, I think that might be what's about to happen. But Auburn's at the 5. With a minute left, the Alabama defense is going to have to strap up. That looks like they're getting some pressure. That has restored some faith in the Crimson Tide fans. They're feeling a little bit better. But Auburn is right back on the 5-yard line, and they throw to the end zone. They get the first touchdown in the final 30 seconds to probably win the Iron Bowl. What we don't know is how this is going to affect Alabama's ranking, because it's going to be their 3rd loss of the year. Ryan Williams has nowhere to go. They still need over 80 yards in the next 30 seconds. And you know what it comes down to? Ty Simpson's thrown 2 interceptions in this game. Make it 3 interceptions. That's going to do it. Auburn is going to win the football game, and they have been able to put themselves into the SEC championship. Here's what really matters, though. How is the top 25 going to shape up? It looks like Alabama's only going to fall down to number 7. I can understand that. Clemson is going to fall to number 11, sitting above South Carolina still. That is really crazy to me, because that would mean they might get the playoff spot over them. We'll see how all the rankings shape up. Both of these teams might be out. Ole Miss has been able to climb up to number 10. They really struggled to open up this season with losses to Kentucky and Arkansas, but besides a loss to Georgia, they've been able to battle their way all the way here. And another team that I thought was done after they started 0-2 was Notre Dame, but besides a loss to USC, they were able to keep on winning, and they finished out the season playing Stanford, not the Trojans. As for other key results, Michigan losing to Ohio State for the first time in years is going to probably get them out of the playoffs. They're not going to be in the conference championship game. Utah dropped a second matchup, this time against Kansas, so they can't have anything nice. Texas Tech also lost, though. UConn's in the top 25 at 9-3. Miami University looks like they're going to be the highest rated conference champion. And look at all the teams that have dropped out of the rankings. Texas, they must have lost again. Georgia must have lost to Georgia Tech. Illinois, Wisconsin, Colorado, Louisville must have lost to Kentucky. Week 14 had to be the most chaotic week that we have seen yet. So many teams losing and changing their ranking, and we're going to see how this has affected all the conference standings. But first, we need to see what happens in the Army and Navy game. With a 38-3 win for Navy, they're sitting at 9-3. They might still have a slight chance at getting into the playoff. They just annihilated Army. But what we don't know yet is if with their three-way tie with Tulane and Memphis for second place in the American Conference, if they're going to be playing USF in the conference championship. Then in the ACC, we have another three-way tie. So this is something to look out for. We don't know which of those two teams is actually going to be in the conference championship. If SMU isn't, their playoff hopes are probably shot. Then over in the Big 12, all of these teams are ranked outside of the top 12. We have Utah and Iowa State playing in the conference championship, so Iowa State still has a chance technically to get into the playoff. West Virginia did not have a good year, but neither did teams like Iowa and Nebraska in the Big 10 that I thought might have done a little bit better. Ohio State actually finished at 7-5 inside the top 25, which is insane to me. Their conference championship, Penn State against USC. Out of Conference USA, Liberty went 10-2, so they could still be that large bid. So could Miami, Ohio, assuming that they're able to beat one of these three MAC schools. Then in the Mountain West, no guarantees Boise State even made the conference championship. I can't believe that they went 8-4. Pac-12, I'm sorry, Washington State and Oregon State. Not sure many people will care about this, but I am going to be working on a Washington State rebuild after this video, so that's something that those fans can look forward to. In the SEC, we got Auburn and Tennessee in the SEC championship after they were able to take home the Iron Bowl. Georgia falling to 8-4 and not making the playoffs is really crazy to me, but they just didn't have a good end to the season. Then you had Arkansas blowing their chance at the SEC championship by losing to Missouri in the final week because they were sitting there with only 2 conference losses. Florida went 7-5. LSU went 7-5. Texas went 8-4. We already know Kentucky was not able to do what I was hoping for. Unfortunately, they just weren't good enough. That is about what I'm expecting our season to look like, though, in real life. Jeremiah Smith, that was one of my predictions I think I've gotten right. He is leading the country in receiving yards, but there's still conference championship week where he is not playing. I should also note, it seems like Kevin Jennings is going to get the Heisman Trophy. Cade Klubnik's stats are a little bit better, though. He has less interceptions, more passing touchdowns, so that's going to come down to the wire. But it turns out SMU is not an ACC championship, so Kevin Jennings is not getting an extra game. I don't think SMU is going to make it to the playoff now, and this allows me to go back to our predictions list. Currently, with Boise State sitting at 8-4, and with Georgia being unranked, I can pretty safely say that those two predictions are not going to happen in this simulation. And then, of course, with Texas Tech currently sitting at 9-3, 6-3 in Big 12 play, that was another prediction that won't be possible because they're not in the Big 12 championship. As we look back at all the conference championship games, though, I think it's important to note that if Miami, Ohio loses this, the next team to get in is probably either Liberty or Navy. There's a lot of unranked teams that could still make noise, including Iowa State as well. I went up and I counted how many teams finished 9-3. There are 14 of them in the top 25. It's making strength of schedule matter more than ever, which means if Duke loses this game at 10-2, they might not get into the playoff. Now, in real life, you're not supposed to be punished in the ranking by losing your conference championship game to the point where you would not get into the playoff because you had to play an extra game and lost. But I don't know how well EA has coded that, which means Duke needs to come out on top of this game, and they're taking a sack. From the looks of it, they're about to get stopped. Miami is going to get the ball back, trailing by 1, where all they're going to need is a field goal, unless Mensah rushed for the first. He was not able to, though, which means this game is now going to be in the hands of Duke's defense versus Carson Beck. They're going to be starting on the 32. They have 2 minutes, which is plenty of time to get 30 yards. And we'll see if they're able to pull it off or not, as they have just moved the chains. This might be where Duke loses their chance at winning a national championship, as they're not guarding the flat well. There's just too much time left for them to keep on giving up short things underneath. And that completion right there pretty much just put Miami in control. If they get a first down here, they're going to be able to run out the rest of the clock and take their 3. But hang on, let's see if the computer's actually smart enough to do the right thing. They're staying in hurry-up mode, which makes no sense to me at all. They scored, but they gave Duke a chance to respond. I don't get it. They could have easily run out the rest of the time. That is something that in 2025, the AI should just be very smart with. And I also wish they tried to get out of bounds more as well. With 28 seconds left, Duke's odds aren't looking too good, but they're still keeping their hopes alive. 9 seconds left here. They're going to basically have 2 shots to the end zone. This might do it. By the time they get up to the line and try and spike the ball or get off another snap, time's run out. They had no timeouts remaining. So Miami is going to win the ACC championship. This is the first of many conference championships we're spectating, but this next one isn't as big of a deal. Both of these teams are still going to have a shot at winning it all either way. I was more so just curious how good USC is going to be using a backup quarterback. They clearly beat UCLA in rivalry week with a backup, but UCLA is not the best. That kind of proved true in this game where the Trojans with their backup didn't score a single point against James Franklin and the Penn State Nittany Lions. You might not want to give excuses to Lincoln Riley, but I think he's got one here. Cade Fox wasn't able to get them any points on the board. He didn't even complete 50% of his passes. And now we shift our focus over to Ford Field where the MAC championship is because Miami, Ohio could be getting in. This would be pretty remarkable for the group of 5 spot to go to a MAC school. And although the final score is going to make it look a little bit closer than it was, the Bobcats scored in the final seconds just to bring it within 2 possessions. Miami, Ohio should be moving on to the college football playoff, but I can see why. I didn't realize that the Red Hawks at quarterback had DeQuan Finn, who was amazing for Toledo. Then he transferred to Baylor. Not sure what happened there, but he is back in the MAC. Another conference championship that could really mess up the playoff seeding would be if unranked Iowa State took down Utah, which is something I'm not going to write off the possibility of because we've seen Utah lose games that they should. The Cyclones got embarrassed the last time that they were in the Big 12 championship, so they made sure that they weren't getting embarrassed here. But I don't know what the Utes are doing running the football. They have less than a minute to score a game-tying touchdown. They're finally starting to throw the rock. But Devin Dampier's got a lot of work to do. Just the fact that they don't have any timeouts makes it so tough, which is why he tried to force it into that window like me. And that blind read is going to cost Utah a Big 12 championship and a spot in the playoff. With Iowa State taking this one home, being an unranked team, I would think that they'd still be one of the 5 highest rated conference champions, but I'm not sure. They have 4 losses. They should be ranked over a team like Liberty, who might finish 11-2 as a conference champion, but I'm not sure if they will be. Same is true for Navy, who's currently sitting at 9-3. If I were to look at the current media poll, not the college football playoff one, you would have Liberty and Georgia State in the top 25. Georgia State plays in the Sun Belt Conference Championship, where Iowa State's not even receiving votes. I have no idea what the bracket's going to look like, but we have one more conference championship I set up to watch before we find out. And these are 2 teams that this season I do not expect to see in the SEC championship. I thought this might be a good game, but Tennessee just ran away with it. Auburn never stood a chance. And we are about to find out like 50 different things going on in the college football world. As for the Heisman Trophy winner, that one went to Kevin Jennings. I didn't believe that his stats were better than Cade Klubnik. 30 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 70% completion percentage, but he had more passing yards and a higher completion percentage, so I'm not upset with him winning it. It's also cool to see some group of 5 guys up here. If Braylon Braxton could have just thrown for a couple more passing touchdowns, he might have been able to win the Heisman alongside rushing for more too. When it comes to conference champions, Liberty won their conference championship, so you might expect that they were a team that got into the playoff, but instead, it wasn't Iowa State that got in. It was Navy taking that last spot. That's right. They just survived against USF, putting up 19 points in the 4th quarter to get the final playoff spot. And then you can see Duke is still inside the top 10. Miami, Ohio, they're coming in at number 11. Auburn did not fall very far either. Boise State won, so they finished the season 9-4. Southern Miss won 42-38 over Georgia State, so they won the Sun Belt with their new head coach and roster that all came over from Marshall. That's where Braylon Braxton plays. I would love to know, though, how the game decided which 9-3 teams deserved a playoff spot over the others, how they decided to rank them, because there are so many 9-3 teams that ended up missing. Just the fact that both Clemson and South Carolina did by the Gamecocks winning in that final week is kind of funny. And I'm telling you, if you got like high team prestige, you are just favored in these rankings, because look at Ohio State sitting at 7-5 in the top 25 still. That was my theory on what carried some of the teams into the playoff spots versus other 9-3 teams that didn't get in. But then I started looking at schedules, and Michigan beat nobody impressive. competitive, so even though they have a maxed out team prestige, they did not deserve a playoff spot. And I am very excited for some games, even in the first round in this playoff bracket. USC with their backup quarterback is going to have to take on Navy. We'll be checking in on all of those, but I also want to run through the award winners. We got the Maxwell Award going to the best player in the country. Basically, the same thing as the Heisman. Kevin Jennings takes home the Walter Camp. But then for getting a MAC school into the playoff, Chuck Martin is going to win the Coach of the Year award. The Davey O'Brien Award presented Quarterback of the Year still going to be Kevin Jennings. For the Chuck Bednarik, that is going to go to Zane Durant on Penn State. One trend I've noticed is the same defensive player is going to win multiple different awards. DJ Harvey is going to be the best defensive back in the country. TJ Harden, SMU's running back with 1,200 rushing yards, 18 rushing touchdowns, won the Doak Walker. That's actually really surprising that they could win the Heisman Trophy and the Doak Walker Award. I don't know if that's ever happened before. This is going to be the best receiver in the country. DJ Rouse, 1,368 receiving yards. That might be more than Jeremiah Smith. It is. That was the one prediction I thought I was going to get right in this video, but because he played in the conference championship game, he is now the leading receiver in the country. And what that means is I clearly do not know ball. Now, I do believe in real life, at least a few of these are going to happen. If you change Kentucky to 5-7, because I'm being realistic, I could see that. But before we get back to checking in on some of the award winners, let's look at some of the other stat leaders across the country. DeMarcus Davis, the freshman quarterback out of Hawaii, led the country in passing yards. Then for passing touchdowns, Carson Beck had 44. No one else came close to him. DeQuan Finn had 37 himself. Interceptions-wise, Connor Harrell for Charlotte threw 20. Ryan Brownie for Purdue threw 19. I don't see that as a surprise. Purdue went 2-10. They struggled a lot. Rushing yard leaders, we got Tawee Walker for Cincinnati. Probably butchered that. Then we have a fullback, Alex Tezka, with 1,504 rushing yards. We get to see him in the playoffs as well. 17 touchdowns. What a monster. The more I look at all the guys that had better stats than TJ Harden, I don't know how he won the Doak Walker Award. He didn't even average the most yards per carry. Then, if we check in on receiving touchdowns, DJ Riles led in that category too. As for sack leaders, FIU's Keegan Davis finished in first place with 12.5. He did not do that for us whenever we did their dynasty. And I don't know why Zane Durant's not on that list, because he clearly had 12 sacks from this display right here. He won the Lombardi, so he took home 3 awards. Braylon Braxton won the Best Senior Quarterback Award. Then you have Wesley Williams out of Duke with 15 sacks, who was not on that list either. So I really don't understand how they're tracking defensive stats. It just wasn't correct. Penn State had the best guard in the country. Virginia Tech had the best tight end. For the best offensive coordinator, Miami, Ohio also takes that home. The best linebacker on California. The Remington goes to Jordan White. The Lou Groza, best kicker. Burt Auburn, I didn't know he played for Miami. He made 100% of his field goals, though. Maybe he transferred there. The red guy goes to the best punter, Missouri State. Getting some love. The Jet Award, Cam Perry, Miami, Ohio. Might return some kicks in the playoffs. And how many awards are there to go through? Sean Alexander, new award as well that's in this game. DeMarcus Davis, Hawaii's quarterback, had the most passing yards in the country. He deserved that. We are finally back to square one. And I can breathe for a second, but not much longer, because we're about to see what happens between Navy and USC, plus all these other first-round games, which I am pumped for. The winner of this one will get Oregon in the next round, who I expect to handle either one of these programs. But it would be so cool to see Navy go on the road to USC at the Coliseum and pull off a playoff win. I guess USC's offense is really that shot, because they're currently losing 28-7 with 2 minutes left in this game. Their backup has not been able to do anything for them. And Navy didn't just beat USC, they embarrassed them and Lincoln Riley on their own field, winning 35-7. Cade Fox literally went 8 for 26. I mean, that's the worst quarterback stat line we've seen all video. Navy does not throw the ball, by the way. They are running it, and they rushed for 143 yards with Alex Tezka. You know what? They might do better next week against Oregon than I was thinking they would. Before we see how Miami, Ohio does against Alabama, though, we have to check in on Ole Miss and Notre Dame, 2 teams that I thought had no chance at making the playoffs after the first few weeks. But they got lucky that everybody else continued to lose and lose while they were winning at the end of the season. And we've gotten ourselves a snow game, which feels so rare on this game. Now, I will say that home environment plus the weather has benefited Notre Dame immensely, as Austin Simmons has only been able to get Ole Miss 14 points in this game. He is throwing an interception here. And so there is going to be no hope of a comeback The Fighting Irish are moving on to the next round where they're going to be taking on Penn State, at least I think. I was hoping we'd get some more clips in the snow, that this game would be a little bit more competitive than it was. But that was not the case, and there's a good chance that this one gets pretty ugly. I'm happy for Miami, Ohio. I am. They're just going into a very tough environment. But something wild has happened, which has caused me to want to spectate earlier than we've looked at any other game so far. Miami, Ohio had a lead. They were up 23-6, but it's falling apart. Dequan Finn just dropped the football there. They could have punted it back and at least made Alabama work for their yardage. And what was seeming like an insane first-round upset might be a very bad first-round collapse, as no one can guard Ryan Williams. I don't know how it even got to a point where they were losing 23-6, but it is pretty sad to see all of that just fall apart. I'm not sure what caused it either, because outside of that one fumble that we saw from Dequan Finn, he has no interceptions. I think their offense just stopped scoring in this game. They'd use an RPO on 3rd and 1. And keep in mind, all they need is a field goal. That is something that's possible, especially if they're going to break a tackle, get an explosive play, and this kid is gone to the end zone. Alabama is going to have to respond back next. This is the best game we've seen so far. And I knew that stuff like this would most likely happen. This is college football. Even if it's a bit unrealistic, he fumbled again. You've got to be kidding. They could have had a 7-point lead. Now if they give up a touchdown, they're going to go right back down. Ty Simpson's got 2 minutes. Miami, Ohio should not be going with man-to-man coverage. And I did figure out the problem that Alabama had, just looking at Ty Simpson's stats. 249 yards, 2 touchdowns, but the 2 interceptions is what has cost them. I can only imagine how Alabama fans currently feel. I'm sure it's a little bit better, though, now that they are moving it down the field, though they're about to lose some yards. Still 90 seconds left. Over on the far side, Ryan Williams has gone to the end zone. I just watched him beat that press. They're giving him outside leverage again, though. At least he wasn't on a streak this time, and they're going to get the sack, too. It is 4th and 21. Alabama literally faked an injury so they could talk about the play, and they're just throwing this one up. They have safety help back there. It's deflected. I can't believe this has just happened. But after it seemed like the regular season simmed pretty realistically besides a couple of results, we have Miami, Ohio winning a playoff game. And it all comes back to Dequan Finn seriously being that good. With one opening round game left, we have Duke and Auburn playing for the privilege of facing Miami in the quarterfinals. And I'm sure the Blue Devils aren't happy about that they might have to face the Hurricanes again. I feel like we've seen Duke play a few times and they typically don't have success, which is why it caught me off guard that this one went a little bit differently for them. As the 4th quarter started, they were up 16-0, but they blew that lead, giving up 16 straight. Then they just kicked a field goal to go on top. But Jackson Arnold is trying to get his team in the best position to respond. They're going to spike the ball and just waste it down. They only need 5 yards, so I don't really have a problem with that. They're going to get it and more, which means at the very least we're headed to overtime. The Tigers still have a timeout left, so they're going to get a field goal off. What they could do is get a touchdown. That is also a real possibility, but they just burned their final timeout. Jackson Arnold goes underneath, and he's tackled in bounds. I think from here it makes sense to play it smart. And are they going to hit this? It's slowed down. Everyone watching, he makes it. Duke could take one final shot to the end zone, but they're just going to run it, head to overtime. And we've got ourselves a good one here. We will see what they end up scheming up both of these teams. By this point in the video, I am 100% in an imperialism mood. I'm in the mood to set up a 136-team tournament too. I really just want to make sure the rosters are as good as possible first though. So far on this drive for Auburn, they have been able to run it pretty well. That was until Jeremiah Cobb got caught up. They're making it 3rd and 1 where they take a sack, and Josiah Green might have just won this game for Duke. We already know Auburn's kicker can hit a field goal from this angle. But what are we about to see out of the Blue Devils? They should not be passive here. Go for the touchdown, even if it means taking on a quarterback spy. I will be very upset if they end up handing this ball off. They hit him with the play action, and they threw that into a tight spot. I don't know how Darian made that throw. There's a reason that he was a transfer a lot of people wanted. I didn't realize Duke also had Jaquez Moore. I feel like the rosters just change so much every year now. You recognize the names, but it's from different teams they've played for. And Auburn's defense did exactly what Duke's did, getting a clutch sack. Apparently, Jaquez Moore's been at Duke his entire career, though. I don't know who I'm thinking of that I got him mixed up with. He has been loyal to this team, and it'd be nice to see him succeed. With the way Auburn has begun to bring heat, though, it makes sense that Duke is having the most success through the air, and we'll see if they stick with that. They do. Slant, touchdown. It's second overtime, though, so they have to go for the 2-point conversion. I saw a wide open slant that they missed. I mean, it still worked out for them. It just could have been an easier 2 points. There's a lot of pressure on Jackson Arnold. He was willing to risk an interception, placing his ball there, and he has gotten them into the end zone in just 2 plays. This is it though. Is Auburn gonna move on with a chance to stay in this one? They do. Now we get to trade 2-point conversions, which is pure chaos. Starting with the Tigers, who take a sack. That was great pressure from the Blue Devils. They're also trying to throw it, and it works. So Duke is going to go into Auburn Stadium. They're going to come away with the win, and they're going to get a chance at Miami for a second time. Just looking at this bracket, another funny thing that could happen is we could get a Miami-Ohio matchup in the semifinals for a chance at making it to the championship. And I think the game that we're going to start with is this one, Penn State and Notre Dame. It should be good, but it doesn't have as many storylines that I'm interested in. In real life, these two teams met in the semifinals last year, with Penn State just falling short, and they can't lose off of a field goal this time. I'm starting to see why Zane Durant was able to win multiple awards, though, because he was just able to get that sack there. He is generating some great pressure. That's one thing the Nittany Lions are always good about bringing. Even though they don't have Abdul Carter this season, they've thrown it straight to Penn State. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, that wasn't even close to being open. I wouldn't make a read that bad. I guess Kenny Minchie was just hoping for the best. Maybe he didn't see the safety there. Either way, it means Notre Dame's gonna lose. And their opponent in the semifinals is either Oregon or Navy. Last week, I was shocked by how well the midshipmen played, so I'm not gonna doubt them again. But I will admit, they are in an awful spot in the final 2 minutes with no timeouts. They were able to get a stop and get the ball back, but they started on their own 1-yard line. And they're being forced to throw the ball too, trying to come back, which is not their specialty. Come on. You're not going to outrun him there. The safety forced them to punt the ball back, which means they never had a chance at getting it again. Blake Horvath just ran backwards into that safety. It's a tough loss, but it was a very impressive season and run out of Navy. Now for another huge underdog, we have Miami, Ohio trying to take down Tennessee. I still can't believe that the Redhawks are even in this position in the first place. And for them to be in a competitive game against Tennessee too, it was not a fluke. That is what's most impressive to me. They still have a chance. Now, they have struggled a little bit more offensively in this one, which is why they only have 14 points. But if they can pick up this 4th and 9, they'll still be in the game, which they do. The injury timeout stops the clock as well. Most of the time, I'd say it's annoying because there's way too many of those at the end of the game, but I'm rooting for the underdog. These receivers just need to start holding on to the football, and this is a 50-50 ball. It didn't look like they had the size for that or the speed, but I can't be upset with a shot like that because it could have worked out really well. Since they got out of bounds there, that was a great play call too. 4th and 5 though, you got to at least get it, and they do. Daquan Finn is cutting things pretty close, but he's kept them in it, at least until his offensive line just blew their protection. For back-to-back plays, you could watch that defensive tackle just manhandle the center, which is why they've double-teamed here. All the time in the world for Daquan Finn to step up and find a receiver at the 32. We're actually seeing some really good adjustments out of the computer. What do they do with 24 seconds left on the clock though? Trying to get out of bounds. You know, here I might not even spike the ball. I might try to get off a quick play. You know, you're probably just going to get a couple shots at the end zone and that's that. But they spiked it. They're getting it out. And they have caught the football. Tennessee is not going to be able to run away with this. Now, that was only part of what they needed. They also have to get this 2-point conversion, which puts the pressure on Daquan Finn to make a play. He can't get loose. He rushed for 120 yards, but he couldn't get 125. That's the game. You hate to see it. Tennessee's moving on to the semifinal. Finally, to see who plays them, though, we have to get a matchup between Duke and Miami again. And it will be in the Orange Bowl, which means Miami technically gets home field advantage, even though it's supposed to be on a neutral site. Is it a little unfair? Potentially, but I don't know what Duke can do about it. All they can try and do is win, which they have slightly better odds of doing after getting that first down. They're in a tough spot at the moment. They got to score a touchdown to tie things up. And it has very quickly become 3rd and 9 where their running back's open down low, but you don't want to put it there. I just cannot imagine the receiver's going to catch this ball. Miami hasn't fully won it yet, but that was not the read out of Darian Mensah. He's got to be better there. Carson Beck's just going to hand this football off, of course. And do we think Darian Mensah gets another chance with it? I don't, because Carson Beck has the read option, and he ends the game. The decision to transfer to Miami might be paying off. Currently, his Hurricanes are sitting inside the semifinals. Georgia didn't even make the playoff, let alone finish inside the top 25. And now that we've been able to narrow it down to these 4 teams, teams, this is starting to feel like a more realistic picture of what could potentially happen. On one side of the bracket, we have Oregon and Penn State fighting for a spot in the championship. And for whoever wins this definitely feels like it is the stronger side. These final few minutes should be pretty interesting as well because Oregon's currently down by 7, but they're going to get into the end zone to tie things up. That gives Drew Aller and Nick Singleton a big chance to shine. They could ice this game with a long drive down the field where they take off a lot of the clock. I don't want to jinx him, but so far Drew Aller's thrown no interceptions. He's not been making mistakes. Nick Singleton just had a great 10-yard run there as well, but he's about to get caught behind the line of scrimmage. That means that they're going to go with an RPO, and that's going to put them at the 47. Crucial play coming up as we approach the 2-minute timeout, and Oregon gets the stop. This could be setting up for an overtime game here. We will see what the Ducks can do. Dante Moore might be able to end it. This first carry has nowhere to go, though. On 2nd and 11, he's just going to go underneath. There's lots of fear of Penn State getting in pressure quick because they have some great defensive linemen, which is going to put the ball back in the court of Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, and the Penn State offense, who are starting on the 42. All the Nittany Lions have to pick up is about 20 yards, and they would be good. Even with Nick Singleton running like a madman, though, throwing that dude off of him, they're not having success. And I think you all can start to see why both of these teams have only been able to put up 17. Both offenses are just hoping to have a big play go their way. Instead, though, we are witnessing them just doing the complete opposite of that. On 3rd and 14, Dante Moore gets it out, though, and they have enough. So with 25 seconds left, there is still some hope. However, they just had to use their final timeout, which is most likely going to send this game into overtime. We'll see how they handle this next play. They need about 5 or 6 more yards. If they get out of bounds, they'd be good, and he fights to get out. That is exactly what you want to see out of the computer. The effort to know you've got to stop the clock. The game-winning field goal is up. It looks like it is long enough. Is it in? The refs are going to signal it is. And Oregon is going to break Penn State's hearts as Penn State falls short in the semis again. The Ducks are just one game away from winning their first ever national championship. Being able to claim that you all won it last year is just dumb with that one poll. I don't think the school would ever actually claim it. I think the fan base just does it to rage bait, but they're going to have an opportunity to win it all against either Tennessee or Miami. I'd like to see the Ducks win it all too. Dan Lanning was awesome when I met him in person. Super nice guy, and I love their jerseys growing up. I loved Marcus Mariota growing up. He made me fall in love with college football. So it'd be neat to see them walk home with the trophy. Honestly, anybody other than Tennessee, though, I'm very satisfied with the fact that they did not put up a good performance here. We've had so many close playoff games, but this one was not that. Miami put up 37. They put up 6 points. Carson Beck played pretty well, only had 6 incompletions, while on Tennessee's side of things, Joey Aguilar got injured midway through. He wasn't playing well either way with 2 picks, giving us a national championship between an ACC school and a Big Ten school. The SEC is nowhere to be found here. I'm just hoping that this one ends up being close. And at the end of it, someone has to take home that trophy. This one's in Hard Rock Stadium too, though. I feel like that has helped out the Hurricanes. They currently have a 4-point lead with 90 seconds left. I will say this, though. Dante Moore has not been helping out Oregon. He's not been doing them any favors. He has 1 interception, no touchdown passes. He's going to throw a 2nd interception, and we're going to end the Natty already. There's nothing the Ducks can do. They're going to fall short. Carson Beck under center, all he had to do was take a knee. And what that means is we have simmed the whole season. If things play out in real life the way that they're going to based off of college football 26, Miami's going to be adding a national championship trophy to their trophy room. Make sure to let me know down in the comments, what do you think's actually going to happen this season? And if you were able to make it all the way to this point in this video, you might as well check out some of my other content because you clearly enjoy it.